Welcome to Speak Life with Dr. Amy Chai. Information for your best life. Now, here's Amy Chai.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Amy Chai, and you're watching Speak Life New Haven. And today we're going to talk about part 2 of Why Can't I Lose Weight? And yesterday, or last program, we talked about how our body is programmed by nature to maintain a certain body weight. And we learned about 2 different hormones called leptin and ghrelin. So we've all been there, right? We've all dieted. We've all watched what we eat. We've all tried very carefully to do our best, exercising, eating less. But still, sometimes it can be very, very difficult to lose weight. And I know a lot of people go to the doctor and they get blamed for being overweight. Like, you're lazy, right? You're greedy. You can't control yourself. And there's a certain amount of stigma that goes into that. But in reality, it isn't your fault. And that is because behavior is actually controlled by Mother Nature. And I remember a commercial back when I was a kid, and it was said, "It's not nice to fool Mother Nature." I don't know if you remember that, but I just want to say that it's not nice for Mother Nature to fool us either. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to get back at Mother Nature and trick our bodies into being able to lose weight. Now, I'm going to bring up a little bit of a slide here. And this slide is about 1,000 calories. And if you're a dieter, you know exactly what I did here. I took a picture of my day's food. And this is all I could eat on my 1,000 calorie a day diet. And I would eat like this for years, and go walking, have a stand-up desk, add in some extra fruits and vegetables, maybe a glass of wine or something now and then. But this was kind of what I was eating. And if you're a woman, particularly who struggles with weight, and women are more likely to struggle with weight than men, maybe you go to the doctor and the doctor will smirk and say, maybe you should stop driving through McDonald's so often. And that's when you just want to throttle that doctor, because you know that you've been eating very little and you're still struggling to lose weight. Now, why is that? So we're going to look at this next slide here. Last time, and if you want more details on this particular slide and what I'm talking about, you should go and look to Why Can't I Lose Weight Part 1, where it talks a little bit more in depth about leptin and ghrelin. But I just want to bring you up to speed and remind you of what we talked about last time. Now, it wasn't long ago that it was thought that the fat stores in our body don't have any sort of function other than storing fat. And that was how we got the idea that calories in versus calories out is how you're going to control the fat mass. But it turns out that it really is not that simple. And it hasn't been that long that we started to learn that fat tissue itself is highly biologically active. In fact, fat is an endocrine organ. Fat secretes hormones and inflammatory factors, and it has a lot of effects on our body. And one of the main effects that fat has on our body is the secretion of this substance that's called leptin. And leptin tells your brain how much energy is in your body. Okay, how much energy? And by energy, I mean fat stores that are available to be burned for fuel. So this fat sends the message up to the brain into the hypothalamus, and it tells the brain, hey, we have plenty of fuel. Or it says, oh no, we're going to starve, so we better be extra careful. And what every yo-yo dieter knows is as soon as you lose the weight, it's really, really hard to keep it off. And one of the main reasons it's so hard to keep it off is because when you lose fat, you also lose leptin. So your body thinks that you are starving, and your body wants nothing more than to see you live through the winter. And so that's why weight loss is so hard to maintain, because your body does try to hold on to the energy stores. It's like emergency fuel, and the body doesn't want you to lose it. So there is kind of what we call a set point where your body wants to stay that weight and it doesn't want to get lower. So let's look at the next slide. So if you have a car and you have some gas in your car, what do you do when you're low on fuel? Well, there's two things you can do. You can either use less fuel or you can rush to get more fuel. And so this is kind of the analogy, like when your fat stores are low, when you don't have much leptin and you think you're starving, the body wants to conserve energy by slowing the metabolism. And it also wants you to think about nothing but where the refrigerator is located. So it actually affects not only your metabolism, but it affects your behavior as well. And it's very, very challenging to trick those biological signals. But it turns out that 99% of the people who have struggles with leptin actually don't have low levels of leptin. They actually have something called leptin resistance. And what that is, it's just like having a gas gauge that does not work. So let's say this fuel gauge is in your car and, it doesn't tell you how much gas is in the tank, right? You don't know when you should get gas, but you're worried. So, you better go get gas just in case you run out because, your fuel gauge is broken. So you're always thinking about, oh, I better get more gas. I better get more gas. So leptin resistance is like having a broken fuel gauge in your car. And so a lot of times there's actually more leptin, a lot of leptin. Your body puts out a lot of leptin. And then what happens is your brain doesn't get the signal that there's actually enough fuel in the tank. So how did they discover this? We're going to talk a little bit about what happened in 1994. It was a banner year for obesity research. And what they did was they took some adorable little lab rats and they did some experiments on these lab rats. So what they did was they bred a certain type of rat until there was a type of rat that would just have abnormal behaviors, would eat more, would not be able to move around very much, and would become obese. So here you see a picture from some of the experiments, and this chunky boy, this cute, adorable little chunky, fluffy rat, they're like, "What's wrong with this rat?" And so what they did was they discovered that this rat did not have the production of leptin, and that's when they discovered leptin. And the word leptin actually means thin. So this obese rat that they found was not producing a substance that caused thinness. So what it was doing, it was just changing the behaviors. It was changing the diet. It was changing the exercise from the brain because the rat's brain thought that the rat was going to starve, but it really wasn't. So the next thing they did was they experimented with giving injections of leptin to the obese rats. And then the obese rats did lose weight and become normal rats again. So you can see that there is a very, very strong biological control system that controls a whole host of functions in the human body. And that hormone is leptin that is produced by our fat cells. But like I said, in humans, it isn't exactly like the rat. It's not that we don't have enough leptin. The problem is that our body doesn't sense the leptin in the brain like it should. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Okay, what are the symptoms of leptin resistance? I have the slide right up here, and it shows a number of symptoms that you will have if you're resistant to leptin in your body, okay? In the middle, I put probably one of the most notable symptoms, and that is constant fatigue and fatigue throughout the day. They've actually done studies with chronic fatigue syndrome and linked it to leptin also. So there is a link with chronic fatigue symptom. But if you have constant fatigue all the time, that could be a sign of leptin resistance. Of course, there's numerous things that cause fatigue, but this is one sign. Another thing in the constellation of problems that's associated with leptin resistance is actually the inability to lose weight. And you see here this woman standing by the scale. She's having trouble, dropping the weight, even though she's trying, she's, changing her diet, she's exercising, she's plateaued, the weight just isn't really coming off and she's not sure why. Down here we have trouble concentrating. So there are mental effects to leptin resistance in the brain. And one of them is like a brain fog. Like it's hard to focus, it's hard to concentrate, it's hard to get motivated. And it also can cause actually depression in the brain with leptin resistance. So that's a very serious potential problem from leptin resistance. Another thing, I have Mr. Sloth there, isn't he cute? An exercise phobia. And what that is just your brain does not want you to go exercise. And it's very hard to motivate yourself to go exercise. You have a hard time completing an exercise thing. And that's because your brain is telling you, conserve energy, conserve energy. You're going to starve and you better not exercise anymore. So that's your brain telling you, don't exercise. I mean, you can override your brain, but it's very hard. That's why it takes so much dedication and motivation to overcome that exercise phobia that you get. You get pain and you get inflammation because as you get the leptin resistance, a lot of times the leptin levels go higher and higher, trying to make some sort of change, and then it kind of creates like a vicious cycle of more fat, more leptin resistance. And leptin is actually like an inflammatory cytokine. So having leptin, a lot of leptin in your body, it actually can cause inflammation, it can cause pain, it can actually cause arthritis. Now, a lot of times the doctor says lose weight to help the arthritis. And the patient thinks, oh, they're just telling me to lose weight because it's extra weight and the weight is putting pressure on my joints. Not true. The reason obesity causes arthritis is not because of the extra weight, although that does contribute. It's because obesity directly causes inflammation, because the fat is a metabolic tissue and the leptin is a cytokine, and the fat produces cytokines. And that's another reason for the depression, because inflammation in the brain is another cause of depression. There is food obsession, where you keep thinking about eating, like you might be daydreaming about like a donut, like Homer Simpson, or, donuts. You're just thinking about having a cookie. You're thinking about having some chips. You're thinking about having calorie dense foods because your brain is telling you, I'm starving, I'm starving, I'm starving. And so your brain keeps making you think about food, okay? So it's like you're addicted to food now. Your metabolism is slowed. There's two parts of your metabolism. One is your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories that you burn when you're just like sitting there doing nothing. And there's also the metabolism that comes from exercise. And both of those are decreased with leptin resistance. For example, you can't build the muscle as readily. Your muscles become more efficient. So you can do the same amount of exercise and you can actually burn fewer calories, okay? Or you can just be sitting and working at your desk, and your basal metabolic rate will also be burning fewer calories. So you actually require fewer calories. So at the same time you're requiring fewer calories, you're constantly obsessing about high calorie density food. This is your body doing a huge complete a number on you. This is insulin resistance. This is a total nightmare. And I think for most people, the worst problem, and the reason I put it in the center, I think the worst problem is actually fatigue for people, feeling tired all the time. So, what are the risk factors for having leptin resistance? Okay. The yo-yo dieting, if you've ever kind of been up and down, up and down, up and down, gain 20 pounds, lose 20 pounds, gain 20 pounds, lose 20 pounds. A lot of us who've had children, you gain some weight with pregnancy, and then you're heavier and you struggle to get the weight off, and maybe you don't get completely down to your skinny pre-pregnancy weight, and then you're like 10 or 15 pounds heavier, and then you get pregnant again, and then it just like kind of yo-yos, and each time you yo-yo, your metabolism drops even further and you get problems with leptin resistance. Your current weight, which I have down here, your current weight will determine if you have leptin resistance also. So if you're heavier, you're going to have leptin resistance. If you have inflammation, you're going to have leptin resistance. So if you have certain types of diseases that are inflammatory diseases, like certain type of autoimmune or rheumatologic diseases, you're likely to have more inflammation, more likely to be more likely to be leptin resistant. Um, the fun part for women, of course, is menopause. Um, with menopause comes a dramatic, actually, drop in leptin, and the leptin that is there is much less likely to be effective in telling the brain to stop eating. So, women will be gaining usually abdominal weight, just where, losing your waistline, putting on 20 or 30 pounds. And it's very, very, very hard to get that off. And in the middle, um, the central factor in a lot of this getting started also is triglycerides. Because they've recently determined, there was an article in Nature not too long ago, a couple, 3 years ago, I guess, that triglycerides, which are those fatty acids that are floating around in your bloodstream or whatever, those triglycerides can actually cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain, and they can actually gum up the works, if you will, as far as your leptin. So having high triglycerides is a big factor in people developing that whole leptin resistance picture. So it's a problem, right? And let's see if I can get my other slide here. Where did it go? Here it is. Here's leptin, okay? Leptin is like a conductor of an orchestra. Leptin is a ruling hormone that rules a lot of different things. It controls your thyroid hormones. It controls your growth hormone. It controls your sex hormones. It controls your adrenals. It controls your pancreas. It also controls learning and memory. So leptin has a whole group of different interactions. And if you have leptin resistance, your thyroid's going to be kind of funky, right? It's not going to work. That's going to decrease your metabolism through your thyroid hormone. It's also going to decrease your metabolism through the adrenal glands, and that's the cortisol and also the adrenaline. The pancreas won't produce like amylin, and it'll affect insulin resistance, learning and memory with inflammation in the brain, and then sex hormones, because of course you need to be fat in order to carry a pregnancy to term. And so, but if you're leptin resistant, you're going to become sometimes hypogonadal, which means like low sex hormones. Like maybe you're going to have like low testosterone or something like that. And the answer to this isn't to replace those hormones or to ratchet up the thyroid hormone or give yourself a bunch of testosterone. The answer is to try to get rid of the leptin resistance. Now, is there something that controls leptin? Well, it turns out there is. What controls leptin is actually the circadian rhythm. And that sort of up here at the top, it sort of shows like sunrise to sunset. Your body will do little spikes of leptin. And unfortunately, in our day and age, we're all staying up late and we're all using artificial lights. And we're all like having a lot of blue lights that gets into our eyes, and it's messing up our circadian rhythm. We're having a lot of stress, and it's just not working very well. It's messing up our leptin levels, and that puts everything else completely out of whack. And I believe that our environment, as far as how we live our lives now, we live indoors. We don't go outside very much. We stay up late. We're under a lot of stress. We just have an unhealthy lifestyle, and that messes up our leptin. It causes leptin resistance, and it causes a whole slew of other hormonal abnormalities that actually relate to the obesity epidemic that we have. And I'd like to point out the learning and memory especially. because we have an epidemic of obesity in little kids as well. Children with obesity are going to have a lot of trouble learning and concentrating, and they're going to do worse in school. And we see this a lot in underprivileged communities where you have a lot of problems with insulin resistance in these kids, and we have to figure out how we're gonna fix that. So, how do we fix leptin resistance? Okay, one of the main things we can do is actually decrease our triglycerides. Now, these you would have to, check all this out with your doctor, but one way is with soluble fiber. Now, fiber is found in fruits and vegetables, obviously, like, apples and oranges and broccoli and whatnot. It's also found in psyllium. And psyllium is a husk of a vegetable that you find in the soluble fiber capsules or in products like Metamucil. Now, the soluble fiber is very important to reduce triglycerides. Another way to reduce triglycerides is with omega-3 fatty acids with EPA and DHA. Usually those are derived from fatty fish like salmon. And you would want to talk to your doctor if you should take an omega-3 fatty acid supplement that might help. Also, eating good fats like olive oil, walnuts, avocado oil. And what you want to avoid is actually alcohol. Alcohol really causes a lot of problems with leptin resistance. And one of the things you'll find, alcohol is quick to cause fatty liver, just like carbohydrates, and sugar is quick to cause fatty liver as well. So you see under there, fruit sugars, and sugars should be fruit juices, and too much sugar, honey, fruit sugars, which has fructose and high fructose corn syrup. All the sodas that are sweetened, all the juices, just say no to all those. No, no, no. And also trans fat, which you find in pretty much every kind of processed type of food, is really, really bad. So this is how you're going to help to decrease the triglycerides. Now, I don't really have enough time to really get into some of the other things that we need to do to trick our bodies, but I'll just talk about it really briefly. I'm going to go back to this slide here. How do we trick the metabolism? Okay. Well, when your muscles are more efficient, you're going to get less calories burned for the exercise that you do. The only time your muscles aren't going to be efficient is when you're doing high intensity workouts. And that's why high intensity interval training, even 1 or 2 minutes of high intensity, is going to help break through that overly efficient muscle and help you to, gain a little bit of advantage there, fooling Mother Nature. The other thing you can do is work on building muscles with weight training. And the more muscle tissue that you have, this is another place where men have a huge advantage. Building that muscle mass is really going to help as well to really boost your metabolism. So that's going to be really important ways to try to, improve your leptin resistance. And there's also dietary changes that you can do too, like everything that I just said to reduce the triglyceride levels, but also to eat 3 meals a day and don't eat any snacks. Don't eat at nighttime, and try to avoid all the carbohydrates, simple sugars, and fructose. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next video, in which time I'm going to talk more about tricking ghrelin so that we're not as hungry. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about diet and exercise tricks in the next video. And I hope this has been helpful and informative to you. And we'll see you next time on Speak Life. And whoever you see today, remember, speak a little life into their world.
Tune in next time for Speak Life with Dr. Amy Chai at ctpolitics.tv.